this conversation, we're going to talk about teenagers and ourselves and how anxiety presents and then how we can manage it a little bit. And I want to give you two different ways to kind of look at anxiety regulation today. And you're going to have to do some trial and error. I'm not going to say that anxiety is going to just poof, go away. Some people really do live with anxiety for the rest of their lives, but that doesn't mean that it's not tolerable, that it's not manageable. We can be highly successful, very astute people who live wonderful lives, who tend to have overactive brains. And so I want to just love on you a little bit, give you some different perspectives. This is Dawn Harima. I'm with Self Foundry, and I am a certified life coach and a high school teacher. And I'm also a mom. I've had 10 teenagers in my house, and I now have a 27-year-old all the way down to a 16-year-old, and I am in the throes of parenting with you. So I want to just help you with my wisdom, my experience, my training. I want to demystify a lot of what happens in parenting today because, frankly, this is not the 90s. This is not the early 2000s. Things are different and we need to get with the program. And I need you all to come together, understanding that we are forging a new frontier in parenting. So let's do this together. We're going to raise resilient kids, confident kids. They're going to sail into adulthood together. We know God has our children. I am so blessed to be on this journey with you of parenting. I mean, I just listened to a sermon that blew my mind about David and then talk about some of what Matthew teaches and just give you some biblical perspective and maybe give you a little bit of a starting point. We know that anxiety is on the rise. We know that kids have a lot of pressure. Some is internal pressure, some is external. We have financial pressures that we didn't experience when we were kids, but the kids are experiencing today. For instance, the cost of education has gone up over 1,000% since the 80s. So we do definitely have different things going on in our children's lives and in our lives. So let's just dive in and let's just see if maybe the Lord gives you a little bit of a golden nugget, something to just take home and chew on today. I was listening to a Tim Keller sermon, who I could just listen to him all day. I just love Tim Keller. I like to go walking. I'm on a new kick. I hate it. Actually, I don't love to go walking, but on occasion I like to go walking. But I'm on a program where I'm trying to do 10,000 steps a day. It's a lot, guys. 10,000 steps sometimes is just a lot. Sometimes it's not. It just kind of seems normal, but there's days when it's I still got to go 4 miles and I'm tired. So anyway, this was one of those days where it was pretty late at night and I popped in a Tim Keller sermon, which I totally love because it's a good 45 minutes usually. And he just left me with such a cool moment. So many coach trainings, which remember, I'm a life coach. So I've been trained. I also teach psychology and I'm an English teacher. So I get a lot of literary perspectives on anxiety and things like that. So I've been training in this in a lot of different ways, but a lot of people, they try to minimize what we're looking at and try to tell you that it's not something to be anxious about. They might say things like, you're imagining things that it's going to be worse than the reality. They might say it's all about you blowing it up in your mind. But I thought this was really, really fascinating. So in Psalms, we'll see David many times talking out loud. And I thought this was whoa. He literally in his Psalms will spell out the worst of the worst possible scenarios. And he will just list them. What if I lost my whole family? What if everybody was killed? What if I lost my kingdom? What if a bear came to attack me? What if my men abandoned me and I was all alone and I was the only one in this battle and everybody left me on the field to die? What if I was injured and just left and I didn't die? I'm just injured. His brain was woo. I mean, he went deep into the anxious. And I love David for a lot of reasons. I didn't appreciate him probably 10 years ago in the same way I do today. He really, really is all about wearing his heart on his sleeve. I mean, what a beautiful gift for a man of God to live it out loud. He's so bold with his sin. He's so bold with his confessions, with his inadequacies, but also with celebrating how much good God has given him and how he is journeying against it. And so when we look at David, he's a man who grapples. And I think that's really people who struggle with anxiety. I think you are just people who grapple and you're almost in a different level. And in some ways, it's super beautiful. Anxiety is an indicator that we need to pay attention. And so when you think about how our brain tells us that we need to be careful to stay alive, anxious is really equating to high alert. So when we're on high alert, we tend to perform in a different level. So when our brain is going like warning, danger, now the problem is it's very primitive. It's either on or off. It's not just a little bit anxious. It's often on anxious or off anxious. And that's the problem because, when we think that we're being hunted by the enemy, like David was when he was in battle, you're on high anxious. But when we are like, there's deadlines to hit, I've got a test I have to take, I have to ask a girl out to prom and she might say no, our brain just defaults on, anxious on, And so we do appreciate anxiety. I don't want you to ever feel like you don't ever want to be anxious. Anxious brings us up in our level. We level up when we're feeling anxious, and that's a gift that God gave us. It also makes our senses really, really astute. When you think about when you're anxious, everything is on high alert. Your ears are perked up. Your eyes are open. Your senses, you are smelling. You're deep breathing. You are prepped to move, right? Anxiety is a fascinating physiological occurrence. And so some of us, though, just default anxious, and that can be exhausting if you're on high alert all the time. And so David's really, really clear about how he would consider journaling today. So his journaling today was all about listing out don't avoid what you're anxious about. Focus on it. I thought that was so crazy. I'm like, focus on your anxiety. So I was like, this is something that's not really taught. And so I just want to see, maybe this is something that will help you. So his suggestion, and I'm going to make it into modern terms, was write everything down. List all of your worries about tomorrow and about the week and about the month and for each person that you worry for and for yourself. Literally get it on paper. So we're going to get it from our brain down on paper. There's a couple reasons for this. One, your brain is terrible at storing information, really, really, really bad. Our brain forgets stuff. I mean, if you've ever forgotten an appointment, that wouldn't be me, not at all. But if you've ever forgotten something, one time I forgot my child at a field, she had to be picked up. I just totally forgot her, terrible. I will never forgive myself for that, right? But, we forget things. So why on earth do we trust our brain to remember stuff? So what happens is our brain knows that we are forgetful. Remember, your brain knows anxiety is because of worry. Something is a threat. Something could happen that's bad. Something could hurt us, whatever it is. It's something that we need to be on alert for. So our brain is reminding us, and it's reminding us and reminding us and reminding us because it knows it forgets things. And sometimes what we are anxious about doesn't have a file category in our brain. Our brain doesn't have a space to place it long term. So what it has to do is keep it on the forefront of your mind. So it's going to keep knocking on you hello, don't forget, you have to worry about tomorrow because you've got a meeting, and it's going to be meeting tomorrow. Don't forget, you're going to have a meeting. You're not ready. Blah, blah, blah. And it's just going to keep knocking and knocking and knocking. So when you write it down, what they're finding is it is a way for your brain to relax. Now I won't forget. So as you finish writing it, you're going to put your hand on the page. I literally night journal, put your hand on by the way, these are great. These little, I got these on Amazon. Just keep one by your bed because a lot of times that's when your brain is trying to hold on to a thought before it goes to sleep. So you're going to write it all out, and then you're going to put your hand on the page and close your eyes and say, brain, thank you for reminding me. I wrote it all down so I won't forget. You can relax now. Part of what we need to do is take the information from the back side, the primitive side of our brain that's all about survival, and let it go to the front, to the higher level thinking. And we are going to tell the primitive part that you are okay. Thank you for alerting me. I am so glad you told me that I need to remember this, that I need to be careful, that I need to prepare, that I need to get my notes together, that I need to dress a certain way, that I have to tell Jimmy this, whatever it is that your brain is kind of looping. Thank you for reminding me. I'm so glad you did. I wrote it down, so now I won't forget in the morning. And then you can put the book down and you can just pray that God carries this for you so you can get into deep rest. So what David is so good about doing is committing his worries to the Lord. So he then, after he goes through his list of all of his worries, he then says, but I'm going to keep my eyes on you, Lord. I'm going to trust you. I'm going to obey you. I'm going to find time for you. I'm going to praise you. I'm going to remember how much goodness is in my life. And what he does is he follows up with his very raw confession of all these horrible things he worries about with praise and thanksgiving. And you could start a fresh page or even have a separate book where you flip over and you start to write down things you are grateful for, that you know have gone well, to remind your brain that things do go well, that you are safe, that you are comfortable, that God is with you. So any evidence that can start to counter the worry, you can train your brain. So it takes some practice. This is biblical. David does that. Matthew gives kind of the opposite perspective. So, David, I thought that was pretty raw. I love that. I thought that was like, wow, that's really beautiful, because sometimes when we are anxious, there's like real stuff. Now, Matthew kind of goes more into the life coaching that I've heard that's pretty common. And so it's a direct contrast to David. Maybe it's been helpful for you. I don't know. It's going to be very individual, but I don't find that most people this is super helpful with. That verse, Matthew 6:34, that everybody knows. Therefore, do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. And Matthew 6:27 was, and which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his span of life? Now that to me, it's tough. I mean, I get it. I think that's part of the conversation of the Thanksgiving. So go ahead and dwell in the space of anxiety. When you are writing down, just like David did, writing down your worries and your concerns, you can also take notes about how it's making you feel. So you can note when anxiety is feeling differently in different parts of your body. So you can kind of you can assign it color. Like today's anxiety feels a little bit like purpley with like some yellow vibration around the edge, and I'm feeling it more in my stomach today, and I think it might be affecting my digestion. You can start to really pay attention to how it's feeling and pay attention to your heart. But what I want you to do is become very, very accepting of your body's reaction. Now, this is only your brain giving a physiological signal to be on alert. And what's really, really calming to me is when you realize that that's not necessarily what's going to kill you. Just because your heart is beating faster or because your digestion is off and your stomach might be queasy. I mean, I've even had clients who throw up. It's not going to kill you. That's just your body reacting in the moment. What is going to happen though is if you avoid it, it makes the thing in your brain bigger and gives it more control because you're not willing to face it. So when you avoid things, your body doesn't get used to addressing it. So if we can teach our brain to look into the stress, to look into the feeling, to face it with a resolve that I know this isn't going to kill me, but I'm going to breathe through it. And I'm going to know that God is going to carry me through it. Now, what's really fascinating is emotions typically cause a 90-second emotional vibration in your body. Think of it as a wave. And the wave kind of comes upon us. Same thing with hunger, actually. If you're one of those people who deal with like an eating issue or having really strong food cravings, our body typically signals in 90-second cycles. So it's going to be a wave, and we know it's going to be super powerful for about 90 seconds. And you can survive a lot for 90 seconds. You really can. And that's really powerful when you look back on it. So if you can, when you're having one of those anxious moments, take some time. I would say write it out. You're moving the feeling from the back of your head to the front. So you're moving it from the primitive feel, react to think and process. So it's going to move it forward. I have one client who this worked beautifully for. Is he was having a hard time moving from the back of his mind to the front. So I said, would you try next time just grabbing some ice and hold the ice just for that really strong part of that anxiety? Like if you could just hold onto the ice for a little while, what happens is the back of your brain being so primitive, it's designed to keep you alive. So if it's focused on worry to keep you alive, it's going to stay in the worry. But as soon as it feels pain, what happens is it has to signal, like it can't do two things at once. It's going to signal that it needs to switch over to pain pain prevention instead of worry prevention. So it's going to switch over. This is why I believe a lot of students struggle with some physiological things like cutting. Kids are so in tune with how to help their body, and they've learned that cutting like connects them in a different way. It's a pain reaction. Ice is also a pain reaction, but it's not going to leave damage. One time it was so strong, he actually put it on his neck, on the back of his neck. But that was such a quick reaction. He said it actually stopped me mid panic attack, and he was able to recenter and refocus and bring himself back to the present and calm down faster. And he said in the past it took him a lot longer to recover, but this actually made it a much shorter struggle. So I just want to share that with you, that there are a lot of things out there, and I want you to keep trying. My biggest thing is this: borrow my hope. Hope for a better tomorrow, hope for future, hope for good things, hope that this will too be manageable. It is something that we can just learn, that when stress is on, the front of our brain can talk to the back of the brain, and you can kind of be like, this is my check engine light. When this light goes on that I need to be on alert, it's like, okay, something's wrong. Lean into it. Ask God in those moments, what am I learning? What are you calling me into? This might be a call for you to lean into God, a deepening of your faith, a deepening of your trust walk. I'm almost convinced that if you have anxiety, I almost feel like you just have, it's like a strange double-sided sword gift where you have this innate, intense connection with your body and with the world, and your sensitivity is just stronger. And if you can kind of learn to embrace it instead of fear it, not that it's comfortable, but you can kind of say like, this is something that just gives me such an intense connection with my brain and my body and my world, that God is the most present in this moment and I come the closest to him. Whatever thought is powerful for you, that's the one I want you to think. So I want you to write it. I want you to think it. Find a thought about your anxiety. I don't want you commenting to yourself that this anxiety is overpowering you or that you can't handle it. That is not going to help you. That is not serving you to have a very unempowered thought. You need to have a powerful thought, a thought that is going to give you control, give you the future you want, give you the growth in your stress and anxiety that you need to be living the life you want to live. It's going to take time. This is not a quick fix, but I think you can do this. Here's some verses for you. Over time, you will grow stronger in your faith, and it does strengthen under pressure. James 1:2-4 says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." Jesus was not immune to stress. Jesus had the most stressful day anybody could ever dream up. If you want to talk about the most anxiety-inducing circumstances, you just have to go to the Garden of Gethsemane. You just have to follow Jesus as he walked to the cross, fully knowing, fully aware that he has been trained for this day. Jesus was so stressed out that in the garden, he developed a rare condition called, I don't even know if I'm going to say this right, hematidrosis, which is a super rare condition. It makes you, when you have acute emotional stress, it makes you sweat until your glands rupture. And instead of sweating sweat, you sweat blood. This is insane levels of stress, guys. If you think your God doesn't understand your anxiety, you are wrong. You're just wrong. You're not alone in this. Jesus knows. Jesus walked through it. And if he can walk through it, he can show us how. Now, it's going to take a lot of training. I mean, Jesus was in training for 30-something years to get ready for this day. You are in training. You are building a resilience that will one day be beautiful. You will be stronger because of it. Jesus knows how you feel in your most anxious moment. Once that situation began to unfold, where he was praying and he knew this was all going to happen, he really started to operate in calm and confidence. He had this anxiety before the event. So think about it. He's in the garden. He's praying and praying. He's asking God to take this cup from me. He's asking God for another way. He's asking for the strength to do what he had to do. He was asking his friends to pray and they were falling short. They kept falling asleep on him and he just was taking it all on, and his body was physiologically exploding, literally bleeding out. As soon as events started to happen, I find this fascinating. He just switches from anxiety to calm, like a switch. He was prepared. He was ready to face it. His brain had gone through all of the horrible what ifs. He had already written down, like I told you, like David did. He already went through every single horrible situation that could have happened. And he now was ready to just bring on the Holy Spirit. Right? Bring on God. He was going to rest in that strength. He relies on God's strength right here. Jesus's spiritual faith walk, training of hardship, he got there to this moment knowing exactly what he needed to do. Because of all of his anxiety training, he was ready to sacrifice everything for us. If Jesus had been living a soft life where he wasn't really suffering, he wasn't worrying, he wasn't anxious about anything, he would have been too weak to love us the way that we needed to be loved. Our sin, when we're dealing with letting anxiety cripple us, is that we will not have anything left to pour out to others. Anxiety is not really a sin as so many people think of it as. You're not doing something wrong. What anxiety is, it's like the brokenness of us. Remember, we are born broken into a broken world. We have broken bodies. They're not ideal. God's going to have to fix this body before we're going to be up in heaven. So I want to just rephrase that. Sin is just our brokenness. That's not how God designed us to be originally. So anxiety, when you think about it, is not part of God's original design. That's why Jesus had to come and walk through his anxiety just like we do. I like to think about us in our heavenly state. What will remain of me? Who is Dawn when I go to heaven? What character traits are going to be with me? Will anxiety, an anxious body, be able to exist in heaven? I don't think so, because anxiety causes us suffering. So we're not supposed to be suffering in heaven. So I want to tell you this is temporary. Okay? You can do this. Jesus did it. We can do this. It's not part of who you are. You are not anxious. Don't ever call yourself anxious. You struggle with it. You struggle with this very human condition of having anxiety about things, but you are not the word anxious. Stop using that word to speak over yourself. That is not your identity in Christ. You are a perfect creation, made in his image, but born into a broken and sinful world. You have a broken and sinful body. Does that make sense? It's really not good. It's sinful, really, to indulge in sin. So we don't want to indulge in anxiety, which is sin in its broken state, not necessarily, again, the act of sinning. We're talking about the brokenness. So with practice, we can strengthen our resilience to this broken component of our body. Jesus is perfect, but he still struggled with anxiety. So is it sin? Jury's out on that, guys. But it's definitely broken. I don't think Jesus in heaven is dealing with anxiety, right? Does that kind of make sense? I want to just clarify that to you. You did nothing wrong. You're not lesser. You're actually more. You're more human. You're more like Jesus. You feel at a deeper level. But Jesus didn't let it rule his life. He didn't let anxiety overrule his purpose. Got that? We have a purpose to live out. We were born with a purpose. Don't dwell and focus on the weakest part of your physical body and let that be defining you. Jesus teaches us to wrestle with the weakness and still live this life designed with purpose that God is offering to us. Jesus' suffering is his connection to humanity. All the negative that we experience as people living on his earth, we suffer and we have a willingness to suffer. And Jesus watches us suffer and still live out the purpose, and that gives Jesus such joy. He says, well done. Well done. You didn't get stuck dwelling on you. You were able to still live out for others. He is able to love and connect with us in a way that would have been impossible to do if he didn't know what it's like to have anxiety and to suffer. So I think it's really beautiful. Relationships are a lot of give and take. Jesus gave more than most people ever will. Anxiety asks us to give, even when our mind is telling us to take refuge, to retreat. When we have anxiety, we have to give our energy and turn our focus outward instead of inward. Look to do rather than dwell, when really all we want to do is be with our thoughts. Anxiety steals your joy. It steals your connection to other people. It steals your ability to create when you're stuck in survival or freeze modes. Anxiety is not you. Anxiety is not going to be carried into heaven with you one day. Anxiety is a state of being right now when God is asking you to meet him right there in the midst of all of your tumultuous thoughts and saying, walk with me through this. There will be glory and there will be peace on the other side. Jesus did not get around his circumstances, my friends. He had to walk through them. It almost makes me want to cry when you think about how he knew, not going to cry. He knew exactly what he was facing. He knew this was going to hurt. He knew it was going to be embarrassing. He knew it was going to be ripping the heart out of his mother and his friends. He knew how horrible hours and hours of suffering were about to be. He was terrified, guys. It's not like the criminals who went up there, like they deserved it. But Jesus knew as a child what was coming. He lived with this worry his whole entire life. He did not get around these circumstances. He had to move through this fear, right through it. I want to tell you that anxiety is real. You're not crazy. I hear you. I see you. I'm praying for you. But I'm not giving you permission to cave into it. God's going to meet you. Are you on your knees? Are you in complete surrender to his will? Are you letting go of your control and remembering that the biggest plan of all is complete restoration one day? You are going to be restored. Are you able to see God in your darkest night? Are you surrounding yourself with Christians and asking for their prayer? Are you possibly being let down by Christians and feeling drawn down because they're letting you down? Remember, God is a good God. He's right there listening. He's right there holding you. You can't see him. You have to trust. Let yourself feel his presence. Are you ready to walk through this pain and go through dark until you find light? It seemed that Jesus's mind was where he was the most stuck. When the actual day came, when the actual worst case scenario faced him, he actually just moved through it kind of flawlessly. He was only stuck in the pregame, my friends. When he got there, it was game on. You're going to be the same. When the hard thing comes, you're going to just do it. Even if it's the worst thing you can imagine, you're going to walk through it. I promise you. But the thinking about it, that's where you're getting stuck. What thought is holding your mind hostage right now? I want to pray with you. I want to make you feel less alone so that you know whatever Goliath you're facing in your life right now, you can have a cord of 3 creating a strength that you need to get through it. Let me be your third part of the cord right now. I had to look at various books in the Bible and read the various retellings of them to find the best one that captures the emotion Jesus was experiencing. It was really fascinating because even in the writings of the Bible, some authors omit emotion. Did you ever notice that? They stick to facts. Other writers in the Bible are able to capture the heart of the people that we read about. I kind of thought after reading all these different versions that Luke did the best job of bringing the feelings alive a little bit about this night. Let me read it to you. Luke 22:39-46. Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed him. On reaching the place, he said to them, "Pray that you will not fall into temptation." He withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them and knelt down and prayed. Here's the prayer. "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. And being in anguish, he prayed even more earnestly, and his sweat was like the drops of blood falling to the ground. And when he rose up from prayer and went back to the disciples, he found them asleep. exhausted from sorrow. All this emotion, even his friends were sorrowful. Why are you sleeping? He asked them. Get up, pray so that you're not going to fall into temptation. What can we take away from this method that Jesus uses in his anxious praying? We learn a couple things. We learn that his friends are not going to be able to save him. His friends, he recognized that they were there. He recognized that they can't save him, but knowing that they were nearby gave him comfort. Don't expect your friends to understand. Don't expect your friends to carry burdens for you. You are the one carrying your worries. You're the one carrying your anxiety. You can also ask them to pray for themselves, because sometimes our emotion becomes theirs. His worries were becoming his friend's sorrows. So sometimes what happens is we draw from each other's emotions. And so when we are anxious, often we are making our friends anxious, and that can make them very tired. So we have to have compassion for our friends, ask them to stay strong through their prayer life, but just maybe don't expect them to fix your problems, but maybe just find comfort in the fact that they're there. So you're going to have a lot of forgiveness for friends who just can't be walking in step with you during your anxiety. Jesus also set himself apart. That is huge. I think that's huge. We need to sometimes find the space to separate ourselves from the daily grind and just be with our thoughts, acknowledge them, write them down, surrender them, call for heavenly help. Ask God for angels. Ask God for heavenly host that is going to empower you and strengthen you in your time of weakness. He went into nature. I love that. He was in a garden, guys. I thought that was so beautiful. We need to sometimes just reconnect with God in a different way. His nature is powerful. Every single season has beauty and has connection to all the different elements that are God. So go in nature. Have a posture. He was on his knees, an intentional posture where he is not doing. I think so often when we're praying, we're more focused on ourselves. Maybe we're drinking coffee, things like that. He literally was focused solely on submitting to God in the most humble position. He was on his knees in posture. Are you posturing your body? Are you posturing your heart? Are you giving into selfish dwelling, which I would consider giving into this earth body of brokenness, where we're just dwelling and allowing ourselves to fall into food indulgences or sleep indulgences or negative behaviors that hurt us, like smoking and drinking and abuse of substances? Are we indulging in our earth body, or are we really focusing on our soul body? So maybe check your posture. It's going to be ongoing. Jesus didn't just pray once. Jesus had been praying to God for years and years and years. And he prayed for hours intentionally in that garden. I mean, hours. And it was focused, and it was exhausting prayer. He took it all out of himself. He cried out. Have you let it out? God literally cried it out. I don't know if you have. Have you ever been in your house and just been yelling to God, crying to God? It's such a good release, and I highly recommend it. There is nothing more freeing than just pouring out the emotion. Sometimes we bottle it up and close it up, and our brain just can't hold it anymore. Cry out, and then the surrender. Not my will, but yours, God. If you can take this cup from me, do it. But make sure that I'm doing your will. Make sure that I'm walking in your promises and in your purpose and your will. I love that. That surrender means you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to fix it. God's going to take care of you. Ask for that angelic strength. Don't borrow strength from human friends. They just can't give it to you, guys. This is going to come from God above. And so I leave you with this quick prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for these beautiful testimonies that we read about of these men who grapple with real extreme cases of anxiety. I thank you for their modeling. I thank you for their teaching. I thank you, Lord, that you answer prayers. And so, Lord, I ask you that everybody listening to this podcast can be faithful in surrender to you, that we can learn to trust our emotions are just indicators, and that you are beckoning us closer. So Jesus, I ask you, if you can take take this cup and remove it from my friends here and not have them suffer lives of anxiety, take it, Lord. I ask you to intervene. I ask you for beautiful peace that passes all understanding that you do promise to us. And I ask you, Lord, to restore what is broken in us. And so, Jesus, I thank you that we are given a promise that our suffering is temporary. Help us to really trust in that. And I pray that something beautiful was taken away from this podcast for anybody listening. Much love to you all, guys. I pray for a peaceful night and a beautiful week, and friends to comfort you, friends to surround you, and strength abundant. Take care.